My name is Thalira Rowan. I am 30 years old. This is my story. 2 weeks ago, if you looked at my Google Calendar, you would see a special entry called Operation 30. It was color-coded, carefully planned, and organized down to every single minute. That's how I am. I like to plan things. I like to build things. I like to make sure the people I love feel happy and cared for. I like to make things perfect for the people I love, even when it takes a lot of work. The man I loved, Kelther, was about to turn 30. For 3 months, I had been quietly planning a birthday weekend that would be amazing. On the weekend, people would show off on Instagram. A weekend that would feel like a movie. A weekend that would feel very special, like magic. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I was doing it because I truly thought Kelther deserved it. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me, where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? Friday night, I got reservations at a restaurant called The Vein. It was one of the hardest restaurants to get into in the city. I had to call people, trade favors, and even work extra jobs just to pay for it. Saturday, he and his friends would go to a spa to relax. Later, he would have a surprise overnight stay at a boutique hotel downtown. Sunday, we would go to a fancy brunch with champagne at a rooftop garden. Everything was planned carefully. Every detail mattered. The total cost of all these plans was about $4,000. But I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the time I spent. I loved him. I just wanted him to feel special. I wanted him to feel loved. I wanted him to feel like he mattered. But while I was busy planning, Kelther was planning something else. Something I didn't see coming. Her name was Zephyra. She was his coworker. At first, she was just a name. The new girl in marketing. The one who laughed loudly. The one who could not make spreadsheets correctly. The one I barely noticed at first. But then, suddenly, she was everywhere. Zephyra brought him coffee as a joke. Zephyra stayed late at work with him. Zephyra texted him funny messages late at night. I wasn't a jealous person. I had many male friends, and I knew men and women could be friends. But this felt different. The way Kelther acted with her felt too close. I could feel him drifting away from me. Not in his body, but in his heart. He was spending time with her, laughing with her, listening to her in ways he had not listened to me in months. Then came the nights. Nights when his phone would light up at midnight with her name. He told me it was just work. He said he was helping her. He said he was a good friend. But I could see the way he looked at her. A soft, private, almost loving look. I hadn't seen him look at me like that in months. Every time I saw it, my chest hurt. One night, he sighed loudly. "Thalira, you really need to work on your insecurity," he said. He didn't even look at me. Zephyra was having a hard time with her boyfriend, he said. He was being supportive. That is what emotionally mature people do, he added. Ah, yes. That was it. He was using therapy words like a weapon. He had been watching TikTok videos and reading Instagram advice. Now he acted like a teacher telling me I was broken. If I said I didn't like him texting another woman late at night, he said I was controlling. If I asked why he went to lunch with her 3 times a week, he said I was imagining things. If I looked hurt, he called it toxic emotional dependency. The moment everything broke was 3 days before his birthday. I had just picked up his birthday gift. It was a vintage watch he had pointed out to me 6 months ago when we were at an antique store. When I came home and placed the gift in the closet, he jumped like he had been caught doing something wrong. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Zephyra," he said, his cheeks red. "She's having a crisis," he added quickly. "Oh, it's always a crisis when I'm not there," I said calmly. "You wouldn't understand," he snapped, brushing past me. "You're so rigid with your emotions. Zephyra lets herself feel things. I'm helping her calm down." I swallowed hard. Calm down from what? He said she had a panic attack at work that day. I put my bag on the counter slowly. "Kelther, what did you do?" I asked quietly. He looked at me like I didn't understand. "Thalira, relax." We went into a quiet room and laid on the couch. I held her while she calmed down. I stopped breathing. "You cuddled her?" I whispered. "At work for an hour," he said casually, pouring himself a glass of wine. "It's a technique. Totally platonic." I stared at him. "You're a man in a committed relationship," I whispered. "You were lying in the dark holding another woman. Does that sound right to you?" "Oh my God, Thalira, stop thinking everything is sexual. Zephyra and I have a soul connection. It's emotional. Just because you don't like intimacy doesn't mean I should stop being myself," he said. He looked at me like he was smarter. Like he had won. Like I was the one who didn't understand anything. He expected me to yell. He expected me to cry. He expected tears and desperation. But something inside me changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't painful. It was like a heavy weight sliding off my shoulders. I saw clearly that he didn't fear losing me. He believed he owned my love, that I would accept being disrespected, that I would continue to plan his birthday while he gave his heart and attention to another woman. He was waiting for me to break, but I didn't. I breathed slowly, poured him more wine, and said calmly, "You're right." He blinked. Confusion. "I am." "Yes," I said gently. "Absolutely." He smiled, thinking he had taught me a lesson. "Thank you, the lira," he said, reaching for my arm. I smiled back. "Oh, I'm growing," I said softly. "I see everything clearly now." He beamed, thinking he had won. But that night, while he slept beside me, texting Zephyr good night, I lay awake, planning something else. By morning, I knew exactly what I would do. Service was no longer needed. The next day, Kelther left for work with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed he had won. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't forget the dry cleaning for Friday." He didn't notice the difference in my voice. He didn't notice I wasn't upset. He didn't notice I wasn't attached anymore. I sat at the kitchen table after he left. My coffee went cold while I opened my laptop. At the top of my list was Operation 30. All the plans were there, tabs, schedules, confirmations. For 3 months, I had treated this like a very special mission. Now it felt strange, like a blueprint for a house I would never live in. I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake. My chest didn't hurt. I just started deleting everything. First, I called the Vane. A young woman answered. "Good morning, the Vane. How can I help?" "Hi," I said calmly. "I have a reservation for Friday under the Lira Rowan. I need to cancel it. Would you like to reschedule?" she asked politely. "No. Please just write the reason as service no longer needed," I said. There was a pause. Then she typed it. "Okay. All set." Next, I canceled the spa. Then I called the hotel and canceled the overnight stay. After that, I called the florist and the bakery. Then I even returned the vintage watch. By noon, Kelther's birthday weekend was gone. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel revenge. I felt peaceful. It was like I had opened a window in a room that had stale air for years. I felt calm. I felt free. By 2 p.m., my suitcases were packed. I moved quietly. I separated my things from his. His clothes, electronics, documents, toiletries, sentimental items, all of it. I even unplugged the coffee maker I had bought for us. When the last suitcase was zipped, the apartment felt empty. But not sad. It felt like finishing a big job. Like I had completed a project. I left the spare key on the counter. Then I walked out and didn't look back. Instead of going home, I checked into a quiet hotel on the other side of the city. A business hotel. Simple, clean, efficient. No one knew me there. Perfect for disappearing, at least for a while. I dropped my bags in the room and sat on the bed. My phone was on the nightstand. I hadn't blocked Kelther yet. I wanted him to see everything. I wanted the shock to hit him when he expected me to be at his birthday dinner. Around 4 p.m. he texted, "Leaving work now. Going straight home. Can you grab that navy dress I like? See you at 7. Love you." His message sounded normal. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just told me about cuddling another woman at work. I didn't answer. At 6 p.m. he asked again, "Hey, traffic is bad. Are you on your way?" I sat on the bed, cross-legged, watching a documentary about coral reefs. The soft voice of the narrator was calm, gentle. Outside, the sun was going down and everything was quiet. The calm felt strange, but good. At 7:12 p.m., his group chat with friends lit up. His friend Thorin sent a selfie of the 4 of them in an Uber, dressed for the night. Kelther was smiling, completely unaware that his big birthday surprise was gone. I said nothing. The weekend I had planned so carefully, the weekend I had dreamed about for 3 months, was gone. But I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt peaceful. I felt free. I felt like I had finally opened the door to my own life. A life where I didn't have to share my heart with someone who didn't value it. Kelther would learn too late. He would realize that the person he thought would always be there, quietly planning, quietly loving, quietly waiting, was gone. And I smiled softly to myself. Because finally I had my life back. At 7:29 p.m., the first message came from Kelther. It said the show was starting. He wrote, "We're here. The hostess says the table isn't ready yet. I thought you called the manager." A minute later, Kelther wrote again. "She keeps checking the system. Something's not right. Where are you?" Then Thorin sent a message. "Dude, what's going on? This is weird." I could picture everything perfectly in my head. The restaurant had a fancy entrance with shiny doors and bright lights. People were quietly talking and laughing. The music was soft and calm. Kelther was standing at the host stand, looking confused, while his friends waited behind him. They shifted awkwardly, not sure what to do. The hostess was scrolling through the computer, checking the reservation notes. She saw the note I had asked her to leave, thinking about whether to tell him what it said. At 7:35 p.m., Kelther wrote, "Call me." Seriously. At 7:37 p.m., he wrote again, "They're telling me the reservation was cancelled. What's happening?" Then at 7:40 p.m., the first big emotional shock came. Kelther wrote, "Service no longer needed." It felt strange, almost like a poem, even though it was so mean. He called 12 times after that. I let the phone ring in the quiet hotel room. At 8:03 p.m., he left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to. I could imagine exactly how he felt. He must have been panicking. He must have been angry. He must have felt embarrassed, all at the same time. Kelther had made a story in his mind that he was the kind, smart, and emotionally strong one. He thought he had a special connection with another woman. He expected to enjoy his birthday weekend like a king. But instead, his friends watched him get confused and upset at the restaurant. By 8:22 p.m., his messages changed from angry to scared. "I'm coming home. We need to talk." At 8:31 p.m. he wrote, "Where is your stuff, Thalira? What is happening?" I took a deep breath. He finally understood a little bit, but he didn't know the worst part was still coming. While Kelther walked around our empty apartment, leaving worried messages that went from confusion to anger to panic, I lay in the soft, quiet hotel bed. The air conditioner hummed quietly. I didn't need to hear his voicemails to imagine exactly what he was feeling. For the first time, he had to face the consequences of his choices. He couldn't control me or the story anymore. He didn't know where I was. He didn't know what I was planning. The sudden silence made him feel lost and helpless. At 8:40 p.m., he wrote a new text. "You moved out. Are you serious?" I didn't reply. He wrote again, "Thalira, you're being irrational. We need to talk. Come home." I stayed quiet. His panic grew with each message. By 8:47 p.m., he wrote, "Just answer me, please. Where are you? We can't end a relationship like this. Talk to me." 8 minutes later, he was angry again. "This is insane. You're making everything worse. Zephyra and I are friends. That's it. You're acting like I cheated." It was funny in a sad way because he had already told me he held another woman in his arms in the dark. He had tricked himself into thinking it didn't count because he called it emotional support. After that, his friends started messaging me. It was predictable. Kelther had spent years convincing them he was the kind, smart, emotionally strong one. They didn't know how he treated me at home, how he used fancy words to confuse me, and how he didn't respect my boundaries. At 9:02 p.m., I got the message I was waiting for, not from Kelther, but from his friend Thorin. "What happened tonight? Kelther is freaking out. He says you canceled everything." "Why?" I typed slowly. "Ask him about Zephyra. Ask what happened in the break room. Then ask how I am overreacting." I hit send and put the phone down. I knew exactly what would happen. When Thorin asked, Kelther would lie and twist the story to make himself look good. But this time, he couldn't hide the truth. He couldn't make cuddling another woman in the dark sound normal. I turned on a nature show and listened to the calm voice of the narrator. The soft sounds of birds, rivers, and gentle wind made me feel even calmer. It was like I was in a peaceful forest while the storm of messages kept coming in my mind. At 9:20 p.m., another text from Kelther came. "Thalira, I'm scared. I don't want to be alone tonight. Just tell me where you are. We can fix this. I'll block Zephyra if you want. I swear. Just come home." He was trying his usual tricks, avoid, defend, then bargain. But blocking Zephyra didn't matter. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was done. To him, this was an argument. To me, it was a decision to leave. At 9:28 p.m., he wrote in a new way. "Fine. Ignore me. But you still owe me for the hotel and spa. You promised." I laughed quietly. He had held another woman in the dark, made me feel bad for being uncomfortable, and now he thought I owed him something. I replied once. "Me. I promised my boyfriend a birthday weekend, but he checked out early to be alone with his work friend. I'm just following through. Enjoy the silence. It's peaceful." 9 minutes later, Kelther wrote, "I hate you." I didn't reply. I blocked his number, and then I blocked all his friends. Not to be mean, but to protect myself. I didn't want anyone sending me messages or trying to tell me what to do. At 11:12 p.m., I saw a notification from Instagram. I thought about blocking him there too, but I was curious. His story was a black screen with white words. The betrayal you never see coming hurts the most. #narcissist. He thought he was the victim. He thought I betrayed him for no reason. But he didn't know what was coming next. He believed the empty apartment and canceled dinner were the worst. But I had one more step, not to hurt him, but to do the right thing. While Kelther was comforting Zephyra in the dark, I learned she had a boyfriend named Corvian. Corvian deserved to know what kind of closeness Kelther had with Zephyra. At 11:45 p.m., I wrote an email to Corvian. I didn't add feelings or anger. I just wrote the facts, what Kelther said, what he did, and why I left. The subject was, Tuesday afternoon at the office. I read it 3 times to make sure it was clear and polite. Then I hit send. I put the phone down, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark. Unlike Kelther, I was calm. There was no panic. Just quiet. Just peace. Just the start of his problems, and my freedom. The next morning, I woke up in the hotel feeling light, like a heavy weight was gone. I made coffee and sat by the window watching people go to work. Usually I would think about Kelther in the morning. But that day I didn't. The center of my life was back where it should have been me. I didn't expect Corvian to respond quickly. He lived far away. I didn't know if he'd check his email. But at 10:17 a.m., I got a message from Lysandra, someone who worked in the same building as Kelther and Zephyra. Something big is happening on the 3rd floor. Did you do something? I didn't answer. I waited. Another message came. Eloan in HR just pulled Zephyra out of a meeting. Kelther texted Thorin saying something is blowing up. I leaned back and stayed calm. It wasn't my problem anymore. At noon, the real news came. Kelther emailed me from work. Subject: Thalira, please answer me. The email was panicked. He wrote, I don't know what you did, but Corvian showed up at the office. He confronted Zephyra in front of everyone. There was yelling, then HR got involved. Zephyra says I crossed boundaries. Why would you do this to me? I read it slowly. He sounded like the same person he always was when I talked about problems in our relationship. He thought he was the good, protective one, helping a coworker in need. He never imagined that the closeness he had with her would be reported and have real consequences. 3 minutes later, another email came. HR pulled me in. Zephyra filed a complaint for inappropriate emotional contact and physical boundaries. Corvian might report me too. I never touched her inappropriately. I was just helping her. Why would she do this to me? Thalira, help me fix this. I lost you. I'm going to lose my job. I closed my laptop. There was nothing to fix. Everything happening to him was because of the choices he made. He took closeness meant for our relationship and gave it to someone else, someone who wasn't loyal when things got hard. I leaned back in the chair, thinking about how strange it was that sometimes people think being nice to someone else makes it okay to break trust. Kelther thought he was helping Zephyra, but he forgot about me, his partner. He forgot about boundaries. He forgot what it meant to be loyal. I made a cup of tea, and the steam from the mug swirled in front of my face. I could feel the warmth in my hands and in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I just felt calm and quiet, like sitting in a sunny garden with the wind blowing gently on my face. I thought about Kelther pacing around our apartment, sending frantic messages, and feeling like the world was collapsing because I had finally said no and left. I realized that people sometimes think the world revolves around them, and it doesn't. Everyone has to live with the consequences of their choices. I thought about how quiet and soft the hotel room was. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I could hear the small sounds outside the window. Birds were chirping somewhere, cars were passing slowly. The world was moving on, and I was moving on too. By the afternoon, I knew that everything was changing. Kelther couldn't control me anymore. He couldn't manipulate the story to make himself look good. He had to face reality. Zephyra had a boyfriend. HR was involved. His lies and excuses wouldn't help him. I felt light and free. I didn't feel anger or hate. I didn't feel the need to argue or explain. I just sat in the calm and quiet and watched the world continue outside the window. The sunshine felt good. The coffee smelled good. The soft hum of the city sounded peaceful. It was the first morning I could really breathe, really rest, really think about me and not him. For so long, I had thought about his breakfast, his sleep, his work, his feelings. But that morning, I only thought about me, about my safety, my peace, my freedom. Everything that had happened to Kelther was the result of the choices he had made. He thought he could break boundaries and make it okay. He thought he could control the story, the emotions, and everyone around him. But he couldn't. Not anymore. And that was the most peaceful part of all. I didn't need to fix anything. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to explain. I just needed to be quiet, calm, and let the world be what it was. And for the first time in a long time, it felt right. At 3:40 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed again. I picked it up and saw an email from Kelther. It wasn't a short email. It was very, very long. There were more than a dozen paragraphs. I could feel my chest tighten before I even opened it. I knew it was going to be a lot. As I read, it was like stepping into a whirlwind of words. Kelther wrote about everything and nothing all at once. He blamed me, begged me, and tried to change the story at the same time. He said over and over that he didn't push Zephra into anything. He said she hugged him first. He said he only wanted to help her. He said Zephra must be lying to protect her boyfriend, Corvian. He even said that I should tell HR what really happened to save him. I kept reading, my eyes scanning every line, waiting for something different. But then, near the bottom of the email, there was a sentence that made my stomach drop. "You ruined my life. Are you happy now?" I stared at those words for a long time. I didn't answer. I didn't feel anything at first. But slowly I realized something important. This was exactly why I had left. Kelther had never taken responsibility for anything, ever. For him, everything was always someone else's fault. Even the mess he got into with another woman somehow felt like it was my problem. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kelther had spent months lecturing me about emotional responsibility. He had used words like accountability and maturity to make me feel small when I tried to say how I felt. And yet, when it came to him, he had none of it. None. I moved the email to the trash and didn't look back. Later that afternoon, Lysandra, who worked in HR, sent me a quick message. She said they had escorted Zephra out of the building. Kelther had been put on leave. Apparently, Corvian had threatened to sue the company if they didn't act immediately. People were talking. It was bad. Really bad. I typed back a short reply. Me. I'm sure HR will figure it out. The truth was, I didn't want to watch Kelther suffer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to see him burn. I just wanted him out of my life. I wanted him gone from the emotional framework I had been forced to live in for so long. The chaos at work wasn't my problem. It happened because Kelther had made choices rooted in entitlement, assuming he could handle someone else's feelings without any consequences. He had misjudged Zephra. He had misjudged HR. He had misjudged everything. And now, without me trying to fix everything for him, the consequences were hitting him hard. That evening, I ordered takeout and snuggled under a blanket in bed. I watched a movie, and for the first time in months, I ate a meal without feeling nervous or on edge. I didn't have to anticipate another conversation about boundaries or emotional support. My mind felt clear. At 11 p.m., one last email came. The subject line said, "I'm sorry, Thalira. I'm so sorry." He wrote that he hadn't realized what he was doing. He didn't know how far things with Zephra had gone. He said he should have listened to me. He said he should never have pushed aside my feelings. He said he didn't know what to do. He needed me. I read it and then closed it. I didn't answer. I stayed silent. For the first time, he felt alone. He felt the weight of what I had felt for months. And this time, it wasn't my job to save him. The next few weeks passed quietly, almost unnervingly. It was as if life itself was taking a deep breath and recalibrating after years of tension and imbalance. The hotel room I had been staying in for work began to feel less like a temporary hiding place and more like a clean, fresh slate. There were no echoes of arguments, no tension in the air, no constant emotional labor to manage Kelther's moods, insecurities, or contradictions. Every morning, I woke up before my alarm, not because I was anxious or stressed, but because I was used to it. And then I realized something amazing. I could just lie there for a few minutes, taking in the quiet, before rushing into another day. A day that wasn't built around someone else's comfort or needs. It took me 3 days to find a new apartment downtown. A small loft with big windows and lots of sunlight. Just enough space for me and the life I was rebuilding from scratch. I signed the lease without hesitation, packed up my things from the hotel, and moved in on a Thursday morning. Standing in the middle of the empty living room, with boxes stacked around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. I felt free. I didn't tell anyone where I had moved. Not my old mutual friends, not Kelther's friends, not even my family. The silence was protective, like a wall shielding me from every version of myself that had once tolerated things I shouldn't have. I didn't owe anyone explanations, especially not the people who had watched Kelther dismiss my feelings for months and called it relationship growing pains. I started building routines again. Morning runs by the river. Evening tea instead of wine. Cooking simple meals for myself instead of planning elaborate dinners just for Kelther. I slept deeply, something I had almost forgotten was possible. The tension that had lived between my shoulder blades slowly dissolved. Each day, I felt more like myself and less like the person who had spent years negotiating the bare minimum from someone who treated loyalty as an inconvenience. Meanwhile, updates about Kelther filtered in through people I hadn't blocked. I didn't ask for them, but some people couldn't resist gossiping under the guise of concern. After the HR chaos, Kelther was placed on mandatory administrative leave while the investigation into his inappropriate emotional relationship with Zephyra continued. He had tried meeting with HR again, insisting everything was consensual, that it wasn't physical, that I had misinterpreted his intentions. But none of it mattered. HR doesn't care about philosophy or fancy explanations. They care about liability and rules. 2 weeks later, the company separated from both Kelther and Zephyra. Corvian broke up with Zephyra. She moved back to her parents' house for a while to reset. People who once adored her now whispered behind her back in office cubicles. As for Kelther, he didn't land softly. He spent days trying to apply for new jobs, but several recruiters had already heard about the investigation. Word spreads fast, especially in professional circles when there's a workplace scandal involving emotional entanglement and boundary crossing. His friends supported him for exactly 1 week, long enough to hear his side of the story, but not long enough to ignore the details that didn't make sense. They asked him questions. Why didn't you talk to the Lyra about this earlier? Why were you alone in that room with Zephyra for an hour? You said you were helping her, but she said you made her uncomfortable. The same people who once praised Kelther for being emotionally aware were now distancing themselves. And Kelther, who had always believed he could control narratives with confidence and therapy jargon, had no script for this. By the 3rd week, he had moved out of our old apartment because he couldn't pay rent without my income. He stayed with Thorin for 4 days, then went to his parents' house in the suburbs. I learned all of this secondhand, not because I needed to know, but because other people needed to share gossip. I didn't dwell on it. His life falling apart wasn't my goal. My goal was simply to remove myself from a relationship that had eroded my self-worth. The rest was just collateral damage. Around the end of the 1st month, I met someone new. It happened quietly without planning. His name was Riven, and he was a trauma therapist at a clinic near my new apartment. We met at a bookstore when we both reached for the same novel. He apologized, I laughed, and somehow we started talking about the author. We ended up walking to a cafe nearby. Conversation with Riven was easy and natural. There were no tricky therapy buzzwords disguised as manipulation. No judgment if I talked about my feelings or boundaries. He listened gently and I felt heard. On our 3rd date, he said something simple but grounding. Healthy relationships aren't built on one person enduring everything alone. I didn't tell him details about Kelther at first, but I felt something shift inside me. I realized intimacy could be safe. Conversations could be mutual. I didn't have to brace myself before speaking. Riven wasn't a distraction from my past. He was a reminder that my past didn't define what I deserved. Meanwhile, Kelther still tried to reach me. I blocked his phone, social media, email, and friends. But he learned persistence in the wrong way. He sent a handwritten letter to our old apartment, which the property manager accidentally forwarded to my new address. I opened it because I didn't recognize the handwriting. The letter was 3 pages long, rambling, apologetic, and full of self-pity, but completely without accountability. He blamed work stress, emotional burnout, and even hinted that I had caused his closeness with Zephyra by being distant. The letter ended with, "We built a life together, the Lyra. You don't just throw that away." He was wrong. I hadn't thrown anything away. I had simply stopped holding something that was already broken. I folded the letter neatly, put it back in the envelope, and dropped it in the shredder at my leasing office. Life with Riven continued in small, gentle steps. Weekend coffee dates, walks through quiet streets, shared meals, and conversations about goals and boundaries. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And most importantly, it wasn't draining. I didn't feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. By the end of the 2nd month, I realized something monumental. I could breathe normally again. And it had nothing to do with Kelther. His downfall was his own doing. My peace was mine. We lived in the same city, walked the same streets, breathed the same air. Even after he moved back to the suburbs, Kelther still came downtown for job interviews and networking events. He was desperate to revive the career he had watched crumble in his hands. Then it happened, We crossed paths in the most ordinary way. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 2.5 months after I had left our apartment. I was inside a small coffee shop near my new building. The smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air. Sunlight streamed in through floor-to-ceiling windows. I was waiting for my order, a pour-over brewed slowly, just like the barista always made it. I felt someone step into my periphery. A familiar presence, but lacking warmth, lacking certainty. "Kelther." "Thalira," he said. Hesitant, almost fragile. I turned. He looked thinner, paler, and tired. His suit didn't fit well. The confident, self-assured man I once knew was gone. "You look good," he said softly. "I am good," I replied. "I'm doing really well." He exhaled shakily, like those words alone had knocked the air out of him. For a moment he just stood there, staring at the floor, gripping his bag tightly. Then he lifted his eyes. "I miss you," he said. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But the punishment, it doesn't fit the crime. I didn't mean to lose you." I didn't respond. I let him speak. He continued. "I lost everything. Thalira, my job, my friends. Zephyra turned on me the second Corvian confronted her. HR believed her. You know that's not true. You know I never pushed her into anything. But everyone thinks I'm some kind of creep. And I lost you too. The only person who ever cared for me. The old Thalira, the one who had spent years compromising her boundaries to make Kelther comfortable, might have gone outside with him. She might have given him reassurance, closure, a soft landing. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I took a slow breath. "Kelther," I said with steady clarity. "Do you remember what you told me in the kitchen the night before your birthday?" His eyes flickered downward. "I was angry," he said weakly. "No," I corrected gently. "You weren't angry. You were condescending. You looked at me and said, 'If you don't understand my needs, that's your problem.' You told me I was the problem for not accepting your closeness with Zephyra." He closed his eyes, bracing himself. I continued. "I tried to communicate. But every time I expressed discomfort, you told me it was my fault. You used therapy language like a weapon. You made emotional boundaries sound like character defects. And when it all fell apart, you didn't take responsibility. You blamed me for the consequences of your own choices. I didn't destroy your life, Kelther. I removed myself from it. Everything afterward was yours to own." His jaw quivered. The realization settled heavier than he expected. He looked around helplessly, like someone was supposed to witness his pain. But no one was watching. No one cared. He was just a man facing the consequences of his own decisions. "Thalira," he whispered. "I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I never wanted to lose you. I want to be better. I can be better. I hope you will," I said softly. "But I won't be part of that process." He shook his head. "You can't just walk away. I already had." The barista called my name. "Order for Thalira." I stepped around him, grabbed my pour-over, and turned back. He was still there, defeated, hollow. "I love you," he whispered. I looked carefully for any old trace of the man I once loved. But all I felt was distance. Not anger. Not sadness. Just distance. "I don't think you know what that word means," I said quietly. I didn't wait for his response. I pushed open the glass door and stepped outside into the cool afternoon. Sunlight touched my skin. The breeze was familiar. The world felt wide and open again. Somewhere a block away, a street performer was playing soft guitar. A couple laughed loudly as they passed by. Life was continuing beautifully, effortlessly. I felt myself stepping back into it without hesitation. My phone buzzed. A text from Riven. "Just picked up groceries. Dinner at my place." I smiled. A real smile. Not one built around someone else's expectations or demands. Not one earned through tolerance or emotional labor. A smile that came from genuine peace. I typed back on my way. As I walked down the street, leaving behind the man who had once convinced me that love meant shrinking myself, I felt the weight of 3 years fall away entirely. Service was no longer needed.